Tour was for young rich men in the 17th and 18th century in Britain, similar to what a gap year is today, and a lot has been written about it, but I think there are some strange quirks and influences that still need to be mentioned. To quickly summarise it for those who have never heard of it, in the late 17th century, people began writing slightly embellished accounts of their travels abroad, and people like John Locke stressed the importance of foreign travel to education and development. So by the middle of the 18th century, many people travelled from Britain through France or maybe Belgium into Switzerland and onto Italy. Ideal trip would see the men learning about architecture and art, maybe dabble in a bit of fencing, that sort of thing, generally becoming enlightened men, and sometimes this did happen. After all, a lot of Renaissance paintings were brought back to Britain, and architecture and fashion changed because of the people returning from this trip. But sometimes, like with many travellers today, the ideas of self-enrichment and education were nothing like the reality. For instance, some people just seem to dislike travelling, like Sir Francis Ronalds, whose first entry in his diary was spent complaining about a drunk man on the boat from Guernsey, and he goes on to complain about there being no privacy in Paris. He also spent a lot of time debating the charms of French women and delivered one of my favourite ever lines. "I managed to avoid their kisses at parting, and I hope I preserved the proper dignity of an Englishman." And one of the stranger things to continuously happen on the Grand Tour is British men would often go and meet Voltaire. In fact, Voltaire once wrote, "Today I had a few Englishmen with me, we were 15 at table. This happens every day, it is one of the great griefs, you would not believe how this cursed philosophy has corrupted my life." In case you're interested, it was quite easy to visit Voltaire, all you had to do was write to him. And one traveller, James Boswell, was also able to visit Rousseau after writing a letter saying that he was a 24-year-old noble who was travelling to improve himself. Otherwise, the travellers would often have a guide who would show them museums, galleries, that sort of thing. But if I'm going to make one comparison between those travelling back then and today, I would like to highlight selfies. Obviously, they didn't have cameras, but obviously they wanted to document their trip. So some Italian artists like Bertoni painted a hell of a lot of portraits of these travellers, and they are often surrounded by classical statues and Italian scenery. And the tour did have a large impact on many things in England. For instance, companies like Wedgwood cashed in on this new demand for classically inspired products and made vases that looked like ruined columns, that sort of thing. But I find fashion to be the most interesting. First people to do the trip, Thomas Coryat, first described umbrellas to an English audience, and of course they came over. But over time, many continental fashions came over to England, like wigs and that sort of thing. And this sort of inspired the whole macaroni look, where young English nobles dressed, let's say, in a very feminine way. Many Englishmen hated the introduction of this new fashion, the macaroni fashion, and one commentator described them as a kind of animal, neither male nor female, a thing of neutral gender.